Hello and welcome to Life After Gray Narcissist Divorce. I'm Paula, and if you like this video, please subscribe. The Narcissist Discard. Why do narcissists discard, and do all narcissists discard? Well, the majority of narcissists discard. There are a few that stay married. I have a friend who's been married to one for over 40 some years. But we're talking about the majority. And just because this narcissist and a few of them that do stay married for a long time, believe me, it is not happily ever after, because it is never happily ever after with a narcissist. So why do narcissists discard? Well, it has in part to do with, entirely, not just in part, with their disorder and some of the criteria in their disorder. And for that criteria, I'm looking at the DSM. I'm looking at both 4 and 5, and this is basically the psychiatrist's or therapist's Bible on narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm just going to look at one thing from DSM-4 and two things from DSM-5 to use to explain why they discard. The first thing is in DSM-4, and that is they are preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. So most narcissistic relationships start out with the love bombing, and that's because they have the grandiose fantasy of ideal love. And I know for myself, when I was still speaking to my ex-narcissist, which we are now completely no contact, he did basically let me know that because I found all the love bomb letters, which is kind of funny and ironic, that he meant them when he wrote them. And so I kind of do follow that, because they're living in a fantasy world. You're their ideal fantasy. They're looking for ideal love. And my ex is out there looking for that again right now. So it's it's just part of their disorder. So that is why, and so you should not feel so bad that you were fooled with them or anything else. That is why they were so convincing during the love bombing, because a lot of them, they believed it themselves, because they're living in this grandiose fantasy. So the other two reasons behind the discard, though, so it starts with the fantasy that you didn't realize you were playing in a fantasy. You thought it was real. To them it was real. It was their real fantasy. That is in DSM-5, their empathy or lack thereof, which means an impaired ability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. They're only excessively attuned to the reactions of others, only in a way that it perceives to themselves. So they'll only be in tune to you in the way that it affects them, okay? Not the way it affects you, the way it affects them. They are only able to think about themselves or how anything affects themselves, not how it affects other people. So intimacy also, that's another thing that's here in the DSM about the intimacy. Relationships largely superficial and exist to serve the self-esteem regulation. So, when you married a narcissist or got in a romantic relationship with them, they didn't give you that little piece of paper to sign that said, hey, you're here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to regulate my self-esteem and boost my ego. So, since you're a fantasy and not a real person when they love bombed you, your continued use is to boost and regulate their self-esteem, which would be pretty much impossible for anyone. And I'm sure I tried, and I'm sure you tried many, many times, because they were always raising the bar for you, etc. And what does that get the other person? The other person becomes exhausted because it is a one-way relationship. It's not a two-way relationship. You are only there as an object to serve their needs. So, of course, you are ending up falling short of the fantasy, and nothing you can do is going to make you regain that, most likely. So what is going to happen in this relationship? Well, a lot of times, a large majority of the times, what is going to happen is they're going to look out for a new ideal love or partner to fix all your shortcomings, because they're not to blame, it's you. They picked a defective partner and person because it's never them. Or, and this is what happened to me, you to start in the discard phase. And the discard phase is a phase. It usually doesn't happen all at once, although it can abruptly happen all at once, but usually it's a process. You've been devalued over a long period of time, and there's hooverings in between until you get to a final discard. But what happened with me is, I don't think at the time he was out looking for another love, although he was constantly letting me know how far short I was falling of boosting up his ego. I was definitely falling way short. I was not showing enough appreciation, gratitude, etc., etc. I was not boosting his ego enough. But what I caused was a severe narcissistic injury. Now, this was based on his own behavior that led me to call the police, and he spent a night in jail. Well, that's a huge narc wound, and that was what led to the downfall, although that happened in 2013, and the divorce actually didn't happen until 2018. So as you could see, it was a long process, and about a year later he was starting the internet, online affairs, etc. But I think what really got the ball rolling was the severe narcissistic injury. Now, you can cause a severe narcissistic injury just by trying to place boundaries, saying no, being your own person, and not constantly stroking their ego. So there is pretty much, unless you are married to one of those narcissists or dating one that stays with the person for life, which they're far and few between, but they do exist, and I do know from a personal friend that it is not a happy or good place that she is in. So if you are in that position, with the discard, that is why. It is because relationships are largely exist to serve them. You are not a person. You are an object. You were a fantasy object in the beginning, and you have not fulfilled their fantasy. So anyway, thank you for stopping by. If you were discarded by a narcissist, what do you think led to your discard, and what are your thoughts on this? I would love to hear from you down below in any comments. So thank you again for stopping by, and I make videos every week, so please subscribe.